Hello and welcome. I am Thomas Porteous and you're watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. Moscow says a meeting between Putin, Zelensky and Trump can only happen after Russia and Ukraine strike a concrete agreement. The Kremlin reacts to Zelensky's call for a three-way summit with a firm not yet. Chancellor Merz and German ministers issue their sharpest criticism yet, threatening action against Israel and halting arms used to violate humanitarian law. The shift comes amid growing public opposition and an EU-wide reassessment of Israel policy. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky arrives in Berlin for talks with Chancellor Friedrich Merz on boosting Germany's support and pushing for a ceasefire. Merz backs Kiev's right to strike Russia as Germany weighs a bigger role in the war. Iran's nuclear chief says Tehran could reject American inspectors even under a new deal unless its demands are fully met. He says past US hostility makes their involvement unacceptable. French President Emmanuel Macron reaffirmed support for a two-state solution in Israel while speaking in Indonesia, insisting France holds no double standards on the Middle East. Diplomats say he's edging closer to recognizing a Palestinian state. A massive explosion rips through a chemical plant in eastern China, killing 5 and leaving 6 missing in Gomi City. The blast flattens buildings and raises fresh safety fears for nearby residents. The Trump administration orders embassies to stop student visa appointments as it ramps up its social media vetting in a crackdown on left-leaning universities. China urges the US to protect international students amid growing campus tensions. 4 women and 2 girls aged 16 and 5 die after a migrant boat capsizes just short of Spain's Canary Islands. Rescuers call it another tragedy on the deadly Atlantic migration route. We move to the Middle East for our top story today. The German Chancellor Friedrich Merz and top ministers have criticised Israel with their toughest warning yet. They threaten action and may halt arms sales linked to humanitarian law violations. The move follows rising public anger and a wider EU policy rethink on Israel. While in Gaza, chaos erupted at a US-backed aid distribution centre as thousands of desperate Palestinians rushed to receive food after weeks of a brutal Israeli blockade. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, also known as the GHF, which manages the aid, faced criticism. This came as the crowd overwhelmed security measures, forcing the staff to briefly withdraw. The UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees condemned the scheme, calling it chaotic and undignified. UNRWA Chief Philip Lazzarini described the new aid model as a waste of resources and a distraction from atrocities in Gaza. He stressed that the existing UN system was well equipped to handle aid distribution without obstruction. Here's what the UNRWA chief said.
The model of aid distribution proposed by Israel does not align with core humanitarian principles. It will deprive large part of Gaza, the highly vulnerable people, of desperately needed assistance.
Meanwhile, according to reports, Israeli airstrikes continued across Gaza, killing at least 16 people, including 9 family members of a journalist. The death toll from the ongoing conflict has now surpassed 53,000, with a significant portion of the casualties being civilians. Lazzarini reiterated that humanitarian assistance should not be politicized and that aid must reach those in need without delay. The solution in Gaza remains dire, with the international community calling for a more effective and unbiased approach to humanitarian relief. We're now joined by our guest today to discuss this in further detail, Mr. Ahmad Fatwa, who is the spokesperson for the Fatah movement located in Ramallah. Thank you very much for joining us. Ahmed, we saw the images coming out of Gaza this morning, chaotic scenes in this new aid distribution program. The US and Israel defend it as a faster way to get aid to people and also less politicized. What concrete flaws did you observe on the ground that back the UN statement that this form of aid distribution is unacceptable?
Thank you for having me. Well, we all saw the images yesterday of the flood of human who are suffering from starvation and in need of food, running for the aid, and that was a catastrophic apocalyptic scene, humiliating to the Palestinian people who are in deep hunger for the past 90 days and on top of 20 months of catastrophic, devastating war. That kind of aid is not non-politicized, it's the most politicized type of aid. Aid should come through the United Nations, through the UNRWA, through the internationally recognized bodies that is neutral, independent, not by organization that belong or managed by Israel and the United States. And we all know what is the position of both of these governments in the case of Palestine. Israel has clearly declared in many occasions, in statements, governments, officials, I don't know what more is needed to declare that they are after the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people, the mass expulsion of the Palestinians from Gaza, and what they are doing in the West Bank is the most glaring evidence when they are annexing lands, and the cabinet just recently issued laws to allow Israeli settlers to register lands from the Palestinian West Bank Area C, which is 60% of the West Bank. That has nothing to do with the hostages, that has nothing to do with Hamas in power in Gaza. That is only for the, let's call it the final solution of the Zionist movement to the Palestinian people, and that is refused. The United States still need to look clearly about the situation and have to dismiss the ideas of forcefully removing the Palestinians from Gaza, because that is going to only deepen the situation further.
Ahmed, I just want to just one last question on this topic of the aid that got distributed today. When thousands overran the Rafah center, Israeli troops reportedly they fired warning shots. They've claimed that they didn't open fire on the crowd like it was reported on social media. Some people were saying that. That's proved to be not true. Critics say militarized aid only deepens despair. Supporters, however, cite security. What is your assessment?
Of course, we can't take Israel, that has been lying for the past 20 months, as a serious source. The actual sources from ground has said clearly that fire bullets were raining on the people looking for aid, and more than 60 has been injured, and that is reported, documented, and has been published by everyone. Now, when they provide 1 point of distribution for 2 million hungry human beings, I don't think that is anything close for the purpose of aid. That is close for the purpose of causing this scene of havoc and apocalyptic scene to push the people toward the south. And we all know what they are, the colonial ambitions. Getting them nearer to Rafah, which is in the borders in the south, has been clarified by the far right.
Ahmed, I'm so sorry for the interruption. It's just that we have limited time here. I now wanted to speak about the fact that German Chancellor Merz has risen his objection with some of the Israeli government's actions. He's signalling an arms export freeze tied to humanitarian law violations. I was wondering what your thoughts are on this raising criticism on the Israeli government. Has it come too late in your opinion?
Well, there is an advanced positions by most of European leaders, but we need an implementation of these decisions by sanctioning Israel for their crimes against humanity and violating the international law. Spain has a very advanced position, also as well, to stop all kind of arms to Israel. The upcoming international conference for the two-state solution aims to consolidate the two-state solution and consolidate the state of Palestine, and to stop and push for a ceasefire, because nobody can accept this carnage to continue. The statement by United Kingdom, France, and Canada has also been very decisive against the action of Israel. The entire world has clarified clearly again and again that what is going is against all the international consensus, against all the process of peace, and only serve for further escalation that's gonna erupt the entire region. The Arabs has provided the Arab and Palestinian plan for reconstruction,
yes,
with the acceptance of the Islamic world, and the EU, which says that Hamas should step down from power, and the Palestinian legal authority will go back to Gaza, and we go for a ceasefire, the exchange of hostages, and go for the two-state solution, and that would put an end for the entire chaos. Israel is refusing the two-state solution for the past 40 years. Enough is enough. Now is time for accountability.
Ahmed Fatwa, thank you for joining us on the programme. We now move over to Europe, where a possible trilateral summit between Russia, the United States and Ukraine might be on the horizon, but only if delegations first make progress. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said Russia's position hasn't changed. A Putin-Zelensky-Trump meeting could only follow successful talks across various channels. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has expressed readiness for such a meeting, but a venue for the next round of direct Russia-Ukraine talks is still undecided. Russia has rejected the Vatican as a host, saying it doesn't fit the talks between two Orthodox nations. The US envoy for Ukraine suggested for Geneva, while Kiev backed locations like Turkey, Switzerland, and also the Vatican. Ukraine has rejected Belarus as a possible venue. Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has said he will announce soon the next round of talks. He added that Ukraine's neutral status remains a core demand. Let's take a listen in to what Lavrov, the Foreign Minister of Russia, had to say.
15 мая в Стамбуле были возобновлены прямые переговоры по всем вопросам урегулирования, к чему мы были давно готовы, но Украина отказывалась, и ее не пускали в этот процесс хозяева, прежде всего руководство нынешней Европы. На этих переговорах от 16 мая в Стамбуле, когда они возобновились, мы настаивали на отмене всех этих дискриминационных законов, и будем продолжать это делать на следующем раунде прямых переговоров, о котором мы объявим в самое ближайшее.
Moscow continues to push for the cancellation of laws it claims discriminate against the Russian language and the Moscow-linked Orthodox Church. Ukraine, however, says Russia is ignoring its willingness to settle the conflict and points to alternative hosts like Malta and African nations. As positions harden and talks stall, a long-awaited breakthrough still seems just out of reach. On the ground, tensions continue to escalate between Russia and Ukraine, with both sides reporting intense attacks and counterstrikes. Ukrainian emergency services say a Russian drone strike killed 1 and injured 8 in the Kharkiv region overnight. Videos show firefighters battling flames at a burning warehouse. Meanwhile, Russia claims to have intercepted over 100 Ukrainian drones, including a swarm targeting Moscow. Moscow mayor confirmed damage in Zelenograd. Across the front lines, heavy fighting continues. Russia says its forces have captured Zelene-Pole and are advancing across several axes. Ukraine confirms intense battles, especially in the Pavlovsk region. Ukraine's air forces reported 88 drones and 5 missiles fired by Russia in a single night. President Zelensky says Moscow has massed 50,000 troops for a fresh offensive on the city of Sumy. Both sides accuse each other of escalating drone warfare. Moscow says over 2,000 Ukrainian drones have been intercepted since May the 20th. Ukraine, however, counters that Russia launched 1,000 strikes in just 3 days. Ukraine is now urging NATO to act, while Russia warns that Europe's lifted weapons restrictions mark a dangerous escalation. We're now joined by Daniel Wagner, CEO of Country Risk Solution, located in Portland, Oregon. Daniel, thank you very much for joining us. I want to first talk about this trilateral possible trilateral meeting that we've said does seem slightly out of reach. The idea of Putin, Trump and Zelensky all in one room doesn't seem very likely currently. Moscow insists that the summit can only happen progress across channels. Which channels do you think have to move first, whether that be Donald Trump, whether that be Vladimir Putin, whether that be Volodymyr Zelensky?
Well, it seems to me that the ultimate decider in this case is going to be Putin, because he rejects just about anything that Zelensky or Trump want to do. So if they want to get in a room and talk, my recommendation would be to take one of the alternatives that the Moscow side is suggesting and make that work. It seems like perhaps Turkey would be a good alternative here as a NATO member with close ties also with Russia. And of course, physical proximity to the extent that that matters. So I would say that that would be a useful approach.
Apologies, Daniel. We are joined also by Professor Georgi Toleraya, who is currently based in Moscow. Professor Toleraya, you experienced some of these drone strikes, these drones that occurred that have been striking both cities. Both cities have accused one another of escalating drone warfare. Could you tell us a little bit about what you've experienced?
Yes, I didn't sleep through the night because approximately at midnight the drone strikes started, and I heard explosions. Probably the drones being shut down. I counted about 10, which happened within several kilometers from my house. There's absolutely no military assets here. If only myself as a military asset, I don't know. So it's just the so-called sleeping area. So that's what we call in Russian hooliganism. That's not a fair way to wage a war, by sending drones for the peaceful population just to irritate Moscow. And I was, in fact, never proponent of escalation, but from emotional side, if Moscow would strike Oreshnik on the Kiev proper, on the capital, I would only support it, because it's very difficult to deal with the people who order such things, who order these irritated strikes against peaceful population with no military purpose. And I just wonder, how can you find any peace agreement, or how can you sign any documents with people like this? So I'm really disappointed with what Ukrainians are doing now, and they're actually trying to irritate Russia to make it some steps that would enable Russia to solicit more help from the West. That's how I see it. And Zelensky visit to Berlin is another proof. He wants more arms and money, and all other countries just a little bit stingy on this issue. So he's now trying to entice the newly elected chancellor to get to help him, which is not also very fair.
Professor Toleraya, thank you. You are staying with us. I'm very glad you are all safe and sound. Daniel, let's get back to the diplomacy. Ukraine says it's ready. Russia wants neutrality in these talks set in stone. If neutrality is the price of peace, what security guarantees could Kiev credibly accept?
Well, now that it's under the so-called umbrella of the U.S. with this mineral deal, I would expect that these trilateral talks with the U.S. would include some sort of security guarantee, not only from the U.S., but from the EU as well, which is obviously equally, if not more, supportive at this stage of the game. Without security guarantees, of course, Zelensky and Ukraine are in a very difficult position, because they're always going to have a hostile neighbor in Russia. And without the security guarantees, it's going to be very difficult to secure long-term peace.
And Daniel, there's this new development as well today that President Zelensky has warned of 50,000 Russian troops massing near the city of Sumy, obviously a city that has suffered vastly during this war. We obviously saw that strike on civilian infrastructure that killed 34 people earlier on. From a risk analysis lens, is this positioning for a negotiation leverage maybe, or a genuine prelude to a possible new offensive?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And nobody except for Putin and the folks on his side seem to know the answer to that. On one hand, you could easily make an argument that he is jockeying for more favorable negotiating positions should peace talks occur, and that he's building a buffer zone in the east to give himself more leverage. On the other hand, you could say, well, this man isn't giving any indication at all that he is readying himself for peace talks. In fact, 50,000 troops and more bombardments, and some of the largest of the war in recent days, would indicate that what he's doing is doubling down and not looking for peace at all, but looking for total victory. So I guess time is going to tell.
Daniel Wagner, thank you very, very much for joining us on the programme. Pleasure as always. We now move over to the Indo-Pacific, where France and Indonesia have signed a preliminary defence pact that could lead to new orders of French military equipment, including Rafale fighter jets and Scorpion submarines. Indonesia is the region's largest economy and Paris's biggest arms client in Southeast Asia. In 2022, the two countries signed an $8.1 billion defence deal that included an order for 42 Rafale fighter aircraft made by Dassault Aviation, as well as a series of agreements including submarine development and ammunition. On strengthening further ties with Indonesia, here's what the French president had to say.
Partnership on all the fields, defense and security, economy, culture, is already strong, but we are strengthening it. And I think this is the best way to handle with this challenging times. So thank you very much for this opportunity, our friendship, and your very special attachment to France. You are a citoyen d'honneur.
Macron arrived in Jakarta from Vietnam on Tuesday night on the second leg of his Southeast Asia tour. The French president is scheduled to fly to Singapore next. While Macron is in Indonesia, the two leaders have also discussed the deepening crisis in the Middle East, with Israel's military action in Gaza. While Prabowo said Indonesia is ready to open diplomatic relations with Israel, Macron reaffirmed his wish to see a two-state solution. We're now once again joined by Professor Georgi Toloraya, who is the director of the Center of Russian Strategy in Asia, Institute of Economics, and Chief Research Fellow of the Institute of China and Contemporary Asia, Russian Academy of Sciences, located in Moscow. Thank you very much for joining us on the program, Professor Toloraya. This is one of the stops on Macron's tour of Southeast Asia. How important is Paris's influence over the region, particularly in Indonesia here?
France is one of the European countries which has some Indo-Pacific, what they call Asia-Pacific relation with local countries, and so they have formulated an Indo-Pacific strategy. Of course, especially the relations with the former French colonies are important for them. We just witnessed the President Macron's visit to Vietnam, which is largely seen by France as a sort of an axis of its Indo-Pacific strategy. And Vietnamese, they do play this game. They signed a big deal of 9 or even 10 billion euros, and they're also cooperating in many areas, including the buying of civil aircraft. So economically speaking, this visit is, I would say, quite successful. Indonesia is the next stop, pretty important one, although there are some rumors that the Indonesian might not be that happy with the Rafale fighters after the Indo-Pakistan conflict, where Rafales haven't shown them to their best extent. But anyway, the visit to Indonesia is a remarkable one, given the time which have passed since the last contacts and given the amount of the agreements being concluded. Indonesia is now emerging as a major global player. Indonesia limited itself to mostly regional role in ASEAN as a leader of ASEAN and a country located in Asia Pacific, not trying to solve or to participate in solving the global issues. But recently the policies have changed after the election of the new president. So you know that Indonesia has joined BRICS as a full member, which is very important for the BRICS itself, as well as the founders of BRICS, who are Russia and China, in fact, along with India and Brazil. So Indonesia has now to pursue more, I would say, multi-directional diplomacy, not just the bamboo diplomacy going with the wind as ASEAN countries are used to do, but rather comparing the choices and trying to balance its relations first with countries like China and Russia against the relation with US and European countries like France. The most important factor here is, of course, China, and the Macron visit to the region. It shows, in fact, some anti-Chinese smell, I would say, aroma, because it's obviously it's against the interests of China if the military and economic presence of the Western countries would increase in the area. We shall see how the discussion will develop in Singapore during the Shangri-La Forum, but obviously the Southeast Asian countries would watch with curiosity and concern what Macron has to present as European and French policy in the region.
Yes, and Professor Toleraya, France sells itself as a third-way power in the Indo-Pacific. Do you think Paris is a useful counterweight to US dominance in the region?
Well, the region is of course the arena of the struggle between, first of all, China and US. And I don't think that anybody would take a European country, especially with a sort of aggressive policy against Russia like France, as a neutral broker or as a neutral force. They're clearly on the West, on the side of the West, and I believe that the Southeast Asian countries do understand it. Of course, they would like to profit from the economic cooperation, and that's what we see. And this will develop, but I'm not so sure about military strategic alliances or any kind of advances, military and political advances, which Europe would like to promote in this area.
Yes, and finally, Professor Toleraya, Macron has framed this tour as evidence that Europe and France in particular, obviously, still has influence east of the Suez Canal. Is that credible when the EU defence budgets are still so stretched by the Ukrainian war?
Yes, of course, I would suggest to Europe first to set its own house in order, including its economic, but at the same time understand that the capital goes where it can grow, and Southeast Asia, East Asia is one of the few areas in the world which we can be reassured that investment will be profitable, will get some return. So it would be foolish for any country or any business to ignore this area, and France and European countries are no exception.
Professor Toleraya, thank you very much for joining us on the programme. Well, that is all we have time for. We will continue to bring you more news updates from around the world. Thank you very much.